Hi, it's Ashlee here, and I'm going to talk to you about sending images from PowerApps with metadata. So currently PowerApps doesn't support sending images with metadata. If you're trying to upload an image to a SharePoint document library and you want to include metadata to be captured in columns, you can't do that natively through PowerApps. But there is a way using Flow that I think is really handy, and I'm going to share. The bit that a lot of people don't like about it is that to do so you have to make a custom connector. To make this custom connector you need a special type of file, which a lot of people call either a Swagger file or an OpenAPI file or just JSON. I never really knew what these words meant. I didn't know that there was a difference between them. I didn't know if there was a difference between them. I didn't know what the difference was. I was very confused. I just did the thing. I didn't care what it was called. But in the interest of actually learning for once, I asked John Liu, and he said that Swagger was the old name for OpenAPI. And Swagger and OpenAPI are like the thing that we're doing. And JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which is the format. So I guess you could say that JSON is like the language to describe the thing, or not, I guess the language, I don't know. And OpenAPI or Swagger like is the thing. I'm still very unclear, and every time people try to explain it to me, I just get more confused. So if anyone has any good metaphors, help. So basically PowerApps reads from this file, which tells it what information to send, and then it sends the information off. That then triggers a flow which can basically absorb all of that information back. What we've got here is just the basic file for image upload with metadata. So at the very top of our OpenAPI file, we have this part that's kind of just what I call all the information-y bit. This part of the file basically tells you what it's called and what it does and where it has to go. You can give it a description, you can say what version it is, all those kind of things. You can see there's bits of URLs in there, so it has a place to send things off to. And the bottom bit of the file is all the information you're sending. So that's all the parameters. With this base file that I've got, you can add and remove parameters as you want, as long as you copy and paste like the exact sections over. You have to be careful with JSON in case you miss like a little bracket or a comma. So just kind of watch out. Yes, so if you do have an issue while you're building out your JSON, I'd recommend using a JSON validator. All of the times that I've had issues with OpenAPI files, or all of the times that people I know have come to me because they've had issues with OpenAPI files, the issue is usually like a stray comma or a missing quotation mark. So I find that a lot of the time, even if you think you've got it perfect, I just kind of copy and paste everything into a JSON validator anyway. Oh, also, I always use Notepad++ when I'm editing or writing JSON, just because it just lays it out really nicely. There's no formatting, you can copy and paste it straight in. And also it does have like settings for JSON and all that. It's just really handy. It's a lot easier to read than regular Notepad and things, which I used to try and use and then gave up very quickly. So to edit this JSON file, what you actually need to do first is make the start of your flow. Make a flow. The trigger is the HTTP request trigger. You immediately underneath that add a compose action, just because a flow needs to have a trigger and an action for it to save. Once you save that, the HTTP request trigger actually generates a little URL for you. What I do with that URL is I then copy and paste it into Notepad, and I break it up into these bits. If you look closely between the URL bits and the JSON, you can see that there are parts that sort of match up. These are the things that you need to replace in your JSON file. If they're not matching, the flow won't be able to trigger. Copy and paste all the bits from the URL into the JSON. It's pretty easy once you know what you're looking for. Only a few of these really change each time, but it's always good to just keep a lookout for each part of it, because you never know if the elements might change at some point. So once you've done that, you've pretty much made your file. It's really not that hard as long as you make sure you've got a JSON validator on hand. Once you've got this file, all we need to do is turn it into a custom connector, which PowerApps can then read and know what information to send. And then we need to set up a flow so that we can gather that information and take it and put it somewhere meaningful. Creating a custom connector is really not that hard. All you do is you go into PowerApps, go into custom connectors, and all you do is upload your saved JSON file, and it pretty much does all the rest for you. At this point, if you want, you can change some things, like if you've messed up the name or description, you can change that. If you want to edit or delete some parameters, you can do that. But yeah, once you've done that, you've pretty much just press save and you've got a custom connector. And if you go into your app now, you can go into data sources and add it, because it will be listed in all the connections. But yeah, once you do that, you literally just add it the same way you add any other data source. You click it and it pops right in there. In the little formula help thingy, you can see that it tells you which parameters you need, and those parameters are the ones that you put into your custom connector. So PowerApps pretty much just swallows it and goes, cool, here's what I need you to give me, and then I'll send it off. Getting information out of the file is a little more tricky. It's kind of hard to explain to people the first time if they have no understanding of how the files work when they collect information. I think that a good way to gain understanding is to just look at what the trigger gives you. So in that compose action that we added earlier, just chuck in trigger and take a look at what it gives you. You're not going to be able to look at it straight in Flow. You're going to have to download it and take a look, and it is huge and it is ugly. It's very overwhelming at first. But if you look at it, you can see there is a structure to it. It has this kind of hierarchical thing where it's split into sections, and those sections each have their own sections, and those sections have their own sections. So it's like a little branching tree. I don't know what that hand motion was. So essentially, once you've taken a look at that giant mess of JSON that's been spat back at you, you'll see that trigger gives you everything. If you change that compose to trigger outputs, you'll see a slightly smaller mess of JSON. That's because trigger outputs only includes the section called outputs. The bit that you want to get your information back is trigger outputs. Another way of writing trigger outputs without using the function trigger outputs is by writing trigger and then using these little square bracket things and writing outputs. So every time something's in square brackets, it's basically telling you to go to the next level. If you want to make it more specific, you can go to another level and you could say trigger outputs queries. And that's how you narrow down which bits of information you want to get. You'll probably end up using a bunch of compose actions. So what you want to do to get each piece of information is look at the parameters that you sent and search for those. So you could do trigger outputs queries file name, or trigger outputs queries comment. And that would take you where you need to get the information that you need, and it would bring back that specific piece of information, that specific parameter that got sent. So that's how to get all the metadata back. You can just start building out your flow like that. The image is slightly more difficult to get to. If you look through that big old file thing, it's kind of hard to figure out where the image is until you get to the giant block of just text. And that's when you know you've got an encoded image. All images are sent in base 64, which basically means it's a whole lot of numbers and letters. You can find that parameter, I guess, under trigger multiparts body, and then it's like a bracket with a 0 in it, and then it says content. I don't really know why. I just know that that's where I need to go to get the image, and that's good enough for me. So yeah, PowerApps sends images as base 64. To save it as an image that we can actually view, we need to convert that to something else. And that something else is binary, because that's what we usually view images in. And that seems like a big hassle. Except Flow has this handy function called base 64 to binary. So all you have to do is put base 64 to binary, open bracket, that trigger multipart body, blah, 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 close bracket, and it will magically convert it for you. There is a little Flow bug where when you do the conversion functions, it doesn't save it. Well, it does save it, but you can't see it. So if you save the file and then open it up again to edit it, you're not going to see that function listed there, which is why I always put it in a comment above, just to make sure that I remember that's what's happening on that action. So yeah, base 64 to binary is a fairly handy function in workflow definition language. You can pretty much just save that converted image into whatever program it is that you're sending it to. And once you've done that, you've got your image, you've got the metadata, and you've saved it all. And it's all come from PowerApps. So I hope this was helpful to anyone out there who wasn't quite sure how to get their OpenAPI files working. If you want a video on anything else, let me know. I'll do my best to explain, even though I don't know technical terms and kind of have no idea what I'm doing half the time. I'll give it a go. And thanks for watching my first proper video. Bye.